And today I'll be talking about middle school work. It's a middle school workshop mainly focusing on what middle school students should be doing now to prepare for college. So I'm Catherine, and then this is our other counselor, Sandy. She's not here today, but we are both always available to help students and families. So a little bit about me. I did do my undergrad at UC Irvine, where I double majored in psychology, social ecology, excuse me. And then I worked for the Department of Education for a little bit, helping students get into colleges. And then I went on to work at USC for a couple of years, focusing on admissions, graduate school admissions, undergrad admissions, and really just helping people throughout that whole process. And then, excuse me, I'm not at USC anymore, but I do have over, I guess at this point, 10 years of experience of helping individuals get into colleges. And I will tell you today that it's all about strategy. It's all about having the most time possible and being very strategic. So we'll talk about that today and how it relates to middle school. Okay, so to get started, I do have a question, ideally for my middle schoolers, but what do you want to be when you grow up? You can just raise your hand. Yes. A cardiologist, okay. Okay, good. OB doctor, cardiologist, nice. Anyone else? Any other middle schoolers? Okay. So the reason I asked this question is because I think one thing to keep in mind is we need to be realistic of what the purpose of college is, right? And why you're focusing in on it now. And the reality is that you ideally are going to school, not just because, you know, Mama and Baba are telling you, but because there's real practical application with that education and what it means for your future, right? So I heard cardiologist. That's a really good one. I'm going to use a different example. What if we try a data analyst? I know maybe someone's not interested in this, but let's try this. And let's try Los Angeles. So I'm showing you this here as an example, specifically because if you're ever interested in understanding how much does a specific career make and what does that mean for my future, right? So here we have a data analyst in Los Angeles. We're looking at about $82,000 to $136,000 per year. So let's go with that lower end of when you first start to work. Now, what we like to call is our reality check, and why the good news is, at least this generation, you have access to technology, you have access to the internet, which is a very special place where you can find a lot of info, but oh darn, it's taking a while to load. Essentially what I was gonna show you is like a monthly expense budget. And the reason why this is important is because the reality is life is expensive, right? So let's try this. Let's say you make $82,000 per year. So that's how much you're making per year. Now we need to think about, okay, how much does it cost, right? If you need to live with a roommate, maybe you can't live at home. This might be a very expensive cost. Oh gosh, I think Sandy's on this as well. Maybe I'm gonna mess with her numbers, sorry. But let's say $2,300. Utilities, right, you know, to keep the power on, things like that costs money. Your cell phone costs money. Groceries, car insurance if you have a car. It's not just paying for the car, it's also the insurance, right? I know mom and dad probably feel this. Luckily, you guys don't have to worry about this right now, but your savings, all this good stuff. And then not included is also maybe student loan repayment. So for those of you going to medical school, the first couple years might be hard after, right? You might owe, I don't know, up to $2,000 a month, let's say. That can really take away from what you actually net or keep. As you can see, for this individual making $82,000, or let's say $150, sorry. Just playing with these numbers here. And if someone wants access to this, you could have access to this to play with it. But they still actually are keeping kind of some of their remaining budget and what they could do with that. So anyway, all this is to give some perspective about your career and being strategic with that, right? And why we're going to college. But moving on here, I'm gonna just move on. So, a question for you all, this is parents and children, but do grades and extracurriculars in middle school count towards your college application? In middle school, what you're doing now? Yes, no, maybe? Not really? Okay. Anyone else? Yes? Okay, yes, it matters? Okay. Good answers. It's definitely in between both. So the reason that is because not really in the sense that what you do now in middle school, you cannot put it on your college application. Colleges do not care. But yes, yes, exactly. Yes, because what you start to focus your time and energy on now, you can be more focused in high school. What I do see a lot of kids doing though is in high school, then they start to think, oh, I need these extracurriculars. And they explore all these different extracurriculars. And then once they start doing that by 10th and 11th grade, they start to narrow it down. But if you start in middle school, when you get to 9th grade, when everything really starts to matter, you're going in laser focused. You're not thinking through, oh, should I take this extracurricular and this and trying to figure it out. You now have a plan. So not really, yes, or both the correct answers is what I'd say, somewhere in between. So what do colleges care about most? There are 4 areas in which they specifically look at. I will say the autobiography area, though, is specific to the UCs and the private universities, not to the Cal States or the community colleges. But so academics, right? It's important to have good grades. It's important to take challenging classes in high school, and it's important to ideally have a good class ranking. Now, activities and leadership. So this is kind of what we're talking about, these extracurriculars here, is that it's important to be involved in extracurriculars that you start to explore. Ideally, then you're narrowing it down. So it could be clubs and sports, it could be leadership, community service, work experience, whatever it may be. But we start to be very focused. And then awards, so academic honors as well as extracurricular recognition. So maybe you gained an award or you hold a leadership position of some sort, and then any like national or regional recognition. And then autobiography, or what's sometimes known as your personal statement, or PIQs for the UC, which stands for personal insight questions, but is how have you grown? What have you learned? And are you resilient, right? Were you met with some challenges? Or did you have a really great situation? What did you make the most of it? Did you give back to others, right? This is a time to really be able to talk about yourself, your experience, and kind of how you navigate and understand the world and what you think. So another question is, who is scared for applying to college? Hopefully not scared yet. A little bit? Okay, that's okay, that's okay. Well, that's good. That's a healthy, to be scared, a little scared. You're a little nervous, and that's okay. So, right? So let's think about what middle school students should start doing. Build relationships with your teachers. I'm going to talk about these things in a couple of different buckets. So the first bucket is building relationships with your teachers. Why is this important? Does anyone want to tell me why it's important? Why do you think it's important to build a good relationship with your teacher? Yes. Okay, very good. Yes. Excellent. Yeah, if you have a bad relationship with your teacher, maybe you don't want to pay attention. They might recommend you for some other opportunities. That's exactly right. So, a couple things to note, right, is that in middle school, the relationships you develop now, although these are not your teachers in high school, they can absolutely recommend you for something more challenging. So for instance, I've seen situations where 7th grader did really well in a class. The teacher really liked them. They're very motivated. They recommended they take an honors class in 8th grade, which is great because that means they're going to take more challenging courses in 9th grade because they'll look at that transcript, right? But if you are the type of student that's not super engaged, your teacher's not going to recommend that, right? Or if you don't like them, so students with strong and positive relationships with their teachers are twice as likely to stay in school and graduate, especially with higher risk populations. All that's to say is if your teachers develop these good relationships with you, they are also more likely to help you, right? Because they see you as an interested student. So I always tell students, go in. I know sometimes what they talk about is not the most exciting thing, but go in and be engaged, be excited. Come in with the mindset of, I'm here to learn something new. Right? And tell your teachers, hey, what I learned today was actually really cool. I actually learned something new today and I appreciate that. Talk to them like that. Build these relationships with them. You don't want to be someone who just, absorbs information and goes and you don't have this relationship with them because I promise it matters. And although mom and dad, you can talk to the teachers, the reality is once they get to high school, you will see they don't want to talk to you. They want to work with your student. So if your student starts to build the skill set now, when they get to high school, it's a lot easier to develop those relationships, right? And it's a lot easier for you to be proactive and for them to also see your genuine interest and curiosity. So the other thing I'll say is participate in class, right? Don't go in with your head down or, I don't want to listen, right? I know it happens, but be curious, ask questions, right? Definitely get some good sleep so you're not feeling tired in class. And then go to office hours or, what I'll call sometimes when you're working and you have a question, ask your teacher, right? Sometimes they'll tell you, hey, think about it a little bit more, or even after school, if you can talk to them a little bit more of something you don't understand, it's a good time to chat with them. Because the other thing that you'll want to do is when you can go and ask them, hey, I didn't do so well on this test. Can you tell me what I did wrong? Or how can I improve? Right? Rather than going with this approach, and I see it sometimes of, I should have gotten an A and they didn't give me an A. My teacher just doesn't like me. That's not an excuse. And the reality is I hear it a lot now, especially in high schools where students say, my teacher didn't like me, that's why they gave me this bad grade. And I believe it. I believe teachers can be tough. But the reality is the colleges don't care. Colleges will never know, right, that you had a bad teacher. They're going to put that onus on you, right? So again, we're starting to build that skill set now, so when we get to high school, we can really perform in this way. The other thing is communicate with your teachers directly. Like I said, Mama and Baba can help you right now, but in high school, they really don't want to talk to your parents. They want to talk to you because the way a lot of teachers see it too is, hey, you need to have the ability to talk to me as a teacher, because when you get to college, it's going to be you talking to your professor, not your parents, right? So having that skill set and that confidence now to ask for the help, be curious, is important. And of course, always be respectful. I know we're always respectful. I hope you're always respectful with your teachers, but always, always be respectful. And again, like I said, little compliments like, hey, what we learned today was really interesting. Thank you so much, right? Or I learned something new today and I talked about it with my parents because I thought it was so cool. I know it sounds silly, but it goes a long way with the teachers. And of course, always show appreciation, like I said. Any questions about this right now, of building good relationships with the teachers? Okay. All right. The next thing I'll talk about, so there are a couple things. So number one, build good relationship with the teachers as a middle school student. Number two, have a growth mindset. Has anyone heard of this before? Growth mindset. Yes, what is it? Okay, very good. I can't do it yet, right? But there's this hook of I can though, right? So having a growth mindset is extremely important. And I understand in today's day and age, it can be tough, right? We're comparing ourselves sometimes to other kids. Oh, this person's smarter than me. I can't do that. I'm never going to be as good as them, right? Sometimes, hopefully, parents don't compare your kids to other kids, right? Because we don't want to put them into this bucket of they're not as good as them, right? But the best thing here you could do is have the growth mindset. The reality is, you're not going to be perfect all the time. The reality is, sure, there might be people that read something once and get it right away. You might have to read it 3 times, and that's okay. But the growth mindset is, I'm going to read it until I get it. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to learn, right? I'm going to practice. I'm going to improve. So this is all what's really key to having a growth mindset. Because in high school, guess what? It gets tougher, right? You need to be resilient. You need to have that growth mindset. Because in college, it's going up another level. But if you can start to develop these skills now, I promise it'll be easier, right? So having that growth mindset is extremely, extremely important. The other thing too is having a growth mindset sometimes means asking for feedback. Like I said earlier, you didn't do so well on a test? Ask your teacher, hey, this is my thought process here. This is how I answered this question. Where did I go wrong, right? Have these conversations with them. And here's just like some research from the educational research of 92% of students who ask for feedback improve their grades, right? Because now you're being open-minded to learning, okay, yes, I didn't do this right this time. There's a different way to think it through, right? Or maybe you ask someone else, but you can turn that feedback into actionable feedback, right? Now you can act on it. You can change your approach, which is important, which all goes back to growth mindset. So the third thing is to choose your friends wisely. I hope we're all doing this, but what characteristics are important? And I'm asking my students here, what characteristics are important to you when you look for friends? Yes. Encouraging. Loyal. What about here? Non-toxic. Okay. What else? Honest. Helpful. Okay. Anyone else? All really good qualities. Excellent. Okay. Yes, we want someone who's honest, who's encouraging, who's helpful. So all I'm hearing are these really great qualities of how someone can lift you up, right? And in return, you're probably doing the same, which is excellent. This is what we should be doing. Now, the reason it's important to have good friends, which goes to say, no, it's obvious, but the reality is the people you're around, you're more likely to develop those habits. So if you're around people that are very motivated, you're going to be very motivated, right? And it's not really like I'm comparing myself to them, but I want to be like that, right? This is the level, this is a standard of being with my friends. Whereas, if someone is not as motivated, you're probably going to be less motivated, right? So of course, choose your friends wisely. I don't think I have to say it, but I do think it's important because you can learn from them too. And I hope people don't necessarily compare themselves to their friends, but see how, hey, if you're doing something that's working right for you or working really well for you, how can I apply that, right? Because you have the ability with that growth mindset to learn, to take that feedback, to see what other people are doing and apply it, right? So it all kind of goes hand in hand. All right, the next thing, the fourth thing here is get an academic edge. So what does this mean? So if your school offers it, you can take a 0 period. I know that can be a bit overwhelming, but the reason we sometimes recommend this, I can't say for everyone, but it could be helpful because if there's an extra class you want to take, something else you want to learn, that might be a good opportunity to do it within school time. Also, it could help you get ahead, and I'll talk about that specifically with math in just a second. But another thing to do is start a foreign language. Some middle schools will let you take like a Spanish 1 or something like that, and that's great if you can take it and do well. The reason being is because when you get to high school, now you take Spanish 2 and then Spanish 3. By the time your sophomore year is over, you've completed really all the Spanish you need for colleges usually. Same thing with the math. This one is key, especially with a lot of my kids. I know you want to go into biology, engineering, things like that. You need to take advanced math. Now, what does this mean? Let's say you start in 8th grade taking Algebra 1. When you get to 9th, you take geometry. When you get to 10th, you take Algebra 2. Then you can take pre-calc and finish with Calculus 1, right? And that's the minimum really you want to get into like a bio or an engineering major. If you can take it even further, right, by taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade, because I know some schools will offer it, that's even better. Because again, it goes in a sequence. Now, in the off chance, let's say you have to take Algebra 1 in 9th grade, you kind of already set yourself back a bit because now you're taking Algebra 1 in 9th, geometry, Algebra 2, and then pre-cal. You can't even get into the calculus. So this is why it's important. Now, if you're not very good at math or you don't love math, that's okay. What you can do though, of course, is try to get some additional help, whether it's with your teachers, parents, if you're really good at math, or tutors, right? There's always some options there. But the reality is you do want to take advanced math. And I've seen this situation, so this is why I share it, is if your teacher is saying, hey, you're really good at math, I recommend you take more, take it, please. I know sometimes some of the kids are like, no, I'm scared, it's gonna be too hard. 8th and 7th grade, if you don't do well, the reality is nobody is gonna use it against you. High school is when it really matters, right? So it's kind of okay to make the mistakes now. And this is why I say, have that growth mindset. You might make mistakes, you might not do so well, but you can apply it. Because come high school, I really want you to go in with your best self ever and best shape. And also the other thing too is really develop, I'm just gonna put them all. Also really develop good study habits. So good study habits should not be developed in 9th grade. I mean, they should, by then they should be, but what I would say too is develop them sooner, right? So figure out kind of what works, right? Do you come home and maybe you need to take a break, right? You eat, you do some de-stressing activity, maybe you play basketball for 20 minutes or whatever, and then after, okay, now it's time to focus, right? Figure out what works to really develop those good study habits and put yourself on that because it really will make a difference, especially if you start to take more advanced classes in middle school. The other thing too is take those honors classes. Again, if your teacher recommends it, go for it. If your teacher is anytime recommending it, that means they see potential. Now, on the other hand though, I will say, parents and students, if you feel like something is too easy, ask for something more challenging. The reality is too, you are your own best advocate, and sometimes the teachers or the school may not advocate for that. But if you think your student is doing well, you see that they're doing well, and or your student is bored, ask for more. You as a parent can definitely ask. I know sometimes there's this idea that if the school doesn't recommend it, maybe they shouldn't take it. I would say don't fall for that. The other thing too is read for fun. Who likes to read from my middle school students? Okay, I don't see too many hands, and that's okay. So the reason why I want you to read though, read for fun. I would say it doesn't have to be an actual book. Just read something every day, whether maybe it's about a new game that you like, or it's about sport, or it's about anything. Just read for fun. And I would say parents, encourage them to read even if it's half a page a day. Why? So I will tell you now that colleges, they've moved away. You've probably heard from the SAT, ACT saying, oh, it's not recommended, or I'm sorry, it's not required. It's test optional now. The reality is by the time these kids are applying for college, it's not going to be test optional. I can tell you that right now. So the reason I share that with you is because kids that read now and do really well and they advance their vocabulary, number one, their reading comprehension, their analysis, these are all things they're going to be tested on for the SAT or the ACT. Same thing with the math. When I say take advanced math, the reality is when you take that SAT, you're going to be tested up to, I think, Algebra 2 math. If you haven't taken Algebra 2, by the time you need to take that exam, you're going to struggle, right? The kids that do really well in the math portion normally take very advanced math, and it's because they've been preparing for that. So all these things have an impact later on, is the point. Yes, of course, you can try to study for the SAT, ACT when the time comes, but it makes it really hard, and I promise you by then, they're probably taking more classes, they feel overwhelmed, and the exams can be daunting. You know, a lot of kids don't do well because they have test anxiety. Yes? Yes, yeah. Good question. Okay, so the UCs, as of this moment, they've said they do not require the SAT, ACT, and they have said we're not going to bring it back. I'll be very honest. I do think there's a chance they might in the couple of years coming. Not right now, but by the time these kids are in college or applying to college, I think so. For the private universities, I'll tell you right now, it's coming back. So the reality is, just for some insight, typically when the Ivy Leagues start to implement something, it trickles down to the other schools. So like Harvard, MIT, schools like that have already brought back the test. It's not optional, it's required. And other schools, like other private schools, like a USC in Southern California, or LMU, or whatever other private schools are interested, CBU, whatever, they might start to bring it back at some point. So again, not right now, but by the time they're there, it will be. And another thing I'll say, just from this admission cycle, what I'm seeing, a lot of universities now too, they realize a lot of kids are writing really great personal statements. Why? Using ChatGPT, yes. And the reality is, a lot of colleges did an analysis and they found that they cannot identify who used ChatGPT and who did not. So guess what? What are they now putting a lot of emphasis on? Test scores. Specifically AP and SAT, ACT. And you're probably asking, what about the grades, right? So the reason why grades still matter, but grades are becoming a little difficult to be for sure, is I've seen kids go to a school, a high school, and they do really, really well. They have straight A's in all their classes, AP, everything. They take the AP exam, they get a 2. And for reference, the scale is 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the lowest. Someone gets a 2. That's not good. But guess what? That exam, no matter what high school you go to in the US, everybody takes the same exam. But not everyone goes to the same high school. Some teachers inflate grades. Some teachers are very hard with the grades. I've seen a student get a C in a class, but a 5 on the exam. What do you think a college admission prefers? I want to see the 5 on the exam. So all that's to say is the exams are the most standard, truest measure of, regardless of where you went to school, regardless of how you're educated, we can really measure that. And because the introduction of ChatGPT for the personal statements and the schools with the issues with teachers, I know there's like more higher classroom sizes, things like that, they're relying less on that. So just some insight kind of as we move through like these next admission cycles. So we'll see how it goes. The last thing, of course, is explore college campuses. Talk about college. The reality is there's significant research that shows, excuse me, that if kids go to a college campus, they are more likely to try to strive to get into that school because they see it, it's like very exciting. And parents, of course, I know we always talk about it, but continue to talk about it, right? Continue to talk about the benefits of it, the excitement of it, because when kids have a goal, they are more likely to focus in on that goal. All right. And speaking of the reading, 85% of successful entrepreneurs say they read at least one book a month. That's 12 books a year. That's a lot when you're working full time and you have families and things like that. So, kids, middle school students, I know you have a lot more time than your parents. You can absolutely read at least half a page a day. At least half a page a day. And when I say read to parents, I encourage you to challenge them. What did you read? Tell me what you read, right? Oh, I read about this. Okay, and what did it say? Have them analyze it. Challenge them to break it down a little bit, even if you're driving in the car or something, because we want them to start thinking more critically about what they're reading and not just reading it to read, but to actually understand what something is saying, right? I know we do that a lot with the Bible, actually, but also doing it with other books, right? All right, so the next thing is understanding the resources available. So I know some parents sometimes don't realize what resources are available at school campuses. For individuals that need additional services, such as like they might have learning disabilities or cognitive challenges, anything like that, you can absolutely always ask your school what they offer. Especially the public schools, they offer an abundance of resources. If you believe your child needs something extra, ask for it. You're always the best advocate for your child. So just something to keep in mind, because I know I've heard sometimes parents don't realize what the schools can offer. All right, the next thing is explore different extracurriculars. I know I kind of touched on this already, but the reality is there's so much, and it's so, so important, because I will say too, that is something that's also unique from student to student on the college application. I know I hear the comments sometimes, can't they make something up? Can't they say they did this, but they didn't really, they did it, but they didn't do that much? Yes, this is true. Obviously, please don't lie on your college application. Don't make up things. But the reality is, if you start to explore extracurriculars now, again, when I said you go to 9th grade, you're going to be more focused. So for example, let's say you want to go as an engineering major. Now that you kind of have an idea that, hey, I've worked with some robotics stuff at middle school, I really like this, I'm going to focus in on that in high school. I'm going to try to do as many activities kind of related within that space rather than joining this club and figuring it out later, right? So all that's to say, though, is 80% of college admissions people do say that leadership experience is a key factor. So leadership, just so you all know, does not mean that you have the title of, the president of the club. No, you can be a leader without holding a fancy title. You can be a leader by saying in your college application, I took initiative, and in my club as a member, I proposed this idea and we ran with it. That's a leader, right? It doesn't have to be the title. So, as I said before, try a range of activities. You could do sports, you could do arts, you could do academic and intellectual activities, service and leadership, entrepreneurial, tech, hobbies, advisory boards. There's a bunch of different things you could do. And parents, I do encourage you, let them explore. It doesn't have to be engineering focus or medical focus. They do have time for that. If they have an art even that they enjoy, let them do that. If they have a hobby that they like, right? I think within reason, right? I know sometimes kids like to play games, but like within reason. Service and leadership, which hopefully, obviously you're doing at church and things like that. Sports, these are all really good ones to explore. Right. And then students who participate in extracurriculars during high school or college actually experience an average of 11% higher lifetime earnings. Now, why? So, oftentimes when you engage in extracurricular activities, you're exposed to different individuals. You are exposed to scenarios where you might have to be a little bit out of your comfort zone and think through these different things. These oftentimes turn into individuals in the workforce that take initiative, that take leadership, right? That might be more open to sharing their thoughts, not just a passive person at work where it's like, okay, yes, even though you don't think that's right? So this is how these things translate over. It's about building, again, that skill set. So later on in life, whether it's engage in extracurricular activities, once they're in college, and even into their job and their career, it does all kind of build on each other. Okay, the next thing I'll share here is, so in conclusion, thinking about all those different things, right? I know the next thing is once you get into college, sometimes a question that we get is, okay, but how do we pay for this? Right? I know it's very expensive. So CEF does offer a $1,500 scholarship for individuals going to college. It could be a transfer student or going from the high school to the 4-year. We also offer one for grad school. So if you have any older siblings or someone applying to medical school or anything like that, we do have a graduate school scholarship. The other thing I do want to raise, and I share this for my kids to dream big, to think big. There is the Egyptian Educational Foundation. This is separate from CEF, but what they do there is they grant you a 4-year full ride. They will cover everything from your college expenses if you are admitted to one of these 5 universities and you go to that university. So, yes, University of Chicago, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, and University of Pennsylvania. These are all very top universities and very difficult to get into. But I share this because these are very expensive schools. At least, you might walk out of there $300,000. It's a lot of money, right? They will cover everything. So I share this because I want students to dream big, to try. Obviously, there's a lot of amazing schools in California. There's also some other really great opportunities out of state. But dream big, think about how you can get there. Okay, the next thing I'll share is we do have an opportunity. CEF has partnered with the UC Irvine Life Vest. Here what they do is they have 4 programs, 2 for girls, 2 for boys. It is a free week-long program at the university where kids will immerse themselves in learning things about finance, economics. So maybe some kids want to go into those fields, right? Be investment banker, things like that. So it's a financial literacy residential program. So I will say the caveat though is they do have to stay on campus for that week, which I know can be a bit much. But the reason being is just because the university sees it as it is their responsibility to oversee these individuals for that week. So they prefer that they stay there, but they do separate them. And this opportunity is only available though to 8th graders and 9th graders. For 8th graders, if it's something you're interested in now, you can absolutely do it. If you do it in 9th grade, obviously something you can put on your college resume or your college application. But for my 8th graders too, this is just also an opportunity where you can explore something. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you like finance. Maybe it's a career you want to get into. It's also a really great career. So this could be kind of that trigger point of like, I learned this. This is something I want to pursue. This is something I'm going to try to continue to find different opportunities for. If you're interested and you want to put your child through this, you could also let us know. We could also notify them. There is a referral code there, but we could also notify them if it's something that you're really interested in to try to get them in. Because not every student that applies gets admitted, but we can absolutely kind of help push some applications if needed. All right. Okay, so recapping here. Number 1, building relationships with your teachers. Number 2, having that growth mindset. 3, choose your friends wisely. 4, get an academic edge. Challenge yourself. Take more challenging classes. Ask for it, right? Read, right? And then lastly, explore extra different curricular opportunities now, right? So you can get ahead later on. All right, I'm going to stop here. Any questions? Yes. The high school exit exam? Okay, really good question. Glad you know about it. So my opinion does vary depending on your situation. I do think in some situations it makes a ton of sense and it is really the best option. For some other situations, maybe not so much. And I'll give you an example. I've had an individual before who came from Egypt, and when their transcript, the high school got their transcript, they said, oh, you're based at 10th grade level because we can't articulate the other classes. They really should have been in 12th grade. Or at least 11th grade. So that individual was going to spend 2 extra years in high school for what? That doesn't make sense. So for them, absolutely makes sense. They should take that exam. Get out of there. They're ready, right? They have that knowledge. For other individuals, and again, I will say it depends case by case. It's hard for me to say yes or no unless I know the situation. But other times that something that you want to think about is, okay, number 1, are you mature enough for going to community college? Because you're 16, you're in a community college with people that can be from ages of 16 to, 80 years old, right? Community college accepts anyone and everyone, and there's different classes. You might have to be someone, are you able to work in groups with other individuals, right? Do you have what it takes? The other thing too is, and this is a common misconception, is that, oh, community college is easy, the classes are so easy. No, they're not always, right? But if you're 16 and you haven't taken those advanced classes, and now you're taking a college level class without the support of your high school, right? Because you don't have a teacher who's gonna say, hey, you didn't do this assignment. Community college, you're an adult. at 16, right? So these are some things that I have witnessed that some students do this and they don't realize what it means to be a very independent learner, and their grades actually suffer. I've seen it happen. Then they try to apply to transfer. They're really smart in high school, right? They're always advanced, but then they get to the community college and their GPA is actually lower. And they can't get into the grade school that they thought they could get into. On the other hand, though, I've seen some success stories where someone's super, super smart, can do it, they navigated it, they transferred successfully, no problem. But I've seen both sides of the coin. So that's why I would say I'd be interested in understanding your motivation. Like, why do you want to do it? How prepared you are to, how do you feel emotionally, mature, right, academically, things like that, before you make that decision. But yeah, it depends, is what I'd say. Yeah. Any other questions? Happy to answer though. Yes. So the requirements are that you have to be admitted to one of those 5 colleges and you have to commit to going to one of them. So that's how you're going to get the money. You have to show proof that you're going to that school. And then, of course, they're going to ask for other things. Like you do have to complete the application, which means completing some like information, as well as submitting like a response to a essay question. And I think they do also ask for like SAT scores, things like that, just to show proof, right? But if you are granted that, it's for the full 4 years, as long as you don't drop out of the college. Or like if you, let's say you go to Harvard and then after 1 year, I don't want to be there, I transfer to another school, you would lose a scholarship at that point. Yeah. Can you tell us more about sports, how it's impacting on the colleges? Good question. Okay, so sports is a great extracurricular activity for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it keeps the kids active, and then also, most importantly, helps them to work with others, right? That's the importance of sports. Even if you're working in an individual sport, like, well, I wouldn't say it's individual, but let's say tennis, for example, you could do a 1v1. You still have to think strategically, right? You still have to think, okay, if I do this, I do that, right? It helps you think in different ways. So sports can obviously be beneficial for those reasons. And then starting a sport early, you can probably, I don't know, I've seen it. Sometimes I go into 9th grade, I start varsity, right? And then maybe by the time you're a junior, maybe you're the captain. So there's that leadership opportunity there. There's some other situations too. These are a little more rare, depending how good you are with a sport, but it could also lead to getting like scholarships for sports, or colleges actively looking to recruit you to their school because they want you to play in their college sports. So that could also be, and again, this is really for the exceptional kids. This is, not often, but it happens. And there are also some specific scholarships around student athletes, depending on the sports, things like that, that could open those opportunities. I will say though, is depending on what your academic or your extracurricular balance looks like, I've had situations where sometimes a student has to leave the sport, and they have to leave the sport because they need to give energy to other things, and that's fair. And then I've had other situations where the student maybe focuses a little less on another activity to focus more on the sport because they're really, really good and they have, scouts looking at them, trying to get them to their colleges. That makes sense. You want to prioritize that, but it does need to have a healthy balance. I usually do not recommend that you only focus on sports, because there's more to the application that we need to fill too than just the sport. Yeah. You were told that when we meet Eagle Scouts to help us go to a college, but how exactly would it help us? Good question. So number 1, it is an extracurricular activity you can put on your college application. Number 2, I encourage you to think about too, as you engage with this, Eagle Scouts, what are you learning, right? What opportunities have you had to be a leader, right? Have you worked with others? Have you solved problems, right? These are all things you can talk about in your application, and specifically too, even in your personal statement, right? Obviously, I know I mentioned the whole ChatGPT thing, but that is something you could talk about, right? I was in this opportunity. I had to work with others. I had to collaborate. This is what it led me to do, or led me to think. So yeah, absolutely, that's a great activity too to have on your application, is what I'd say. So it's definitely helpful. Yeah. Any other questions? And the other thing I'll say too about activities is we want a nice balanced portfolio, right? We want you to be engaged in different things. It could be from sports, from leadership, whatever it may be. But of course, to maintain a good balance, I will say I'd rather see a college application that has 5 really good extracurriculars than one where I see kids, it's obvious that they're just filling, because you can put up to 20 activities, that they're just filling little activities. The other thing I'll mention about extracurriculars too, just because I see this very, very often when I'm working with students already in high school and they can't do much about it, is we need to see longevity within an extracurricular. What does this mean? And commitment. So what does this mean? Example, I know a lot of us with the church go and help feed the homeless maybe 3 times a year, right? Which is great. It's a good activity, but it's not one of the ones that may be viewed as extremely exceptional from the college admission committee, specifically because when you help with the homeless 3 times a year, maybe you're helping, 3 hours each time, 4 hours, whatever it may be, a collective of about 12 hours a year. Whereas if you engage in something else where you're feeding the homeless monthly or bi-weekly, right? Now the hours add up, because in the college application, they will ask you, how many weeks per year did you do this? And how many hours per week? And they get a number. If I have a kid with 12 hours versus a kid with 200 hours, that's a big difference. The 200 hours shows that commitment, shows that longevity, that they remained committed to doing something and it wasn't sporadic. So that makes a big difference too. So just something to think about as you narrow down in high school which activities you want to work on, focus in on them and stay committed to them if possible, is what I'd say. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I know sometimes we think about things after. I'll use the spiel that I know Monique likes to give from CEF, but she always says, when you go home after today, maybe don't talk about college. And I say this because we don't want the parents to fight with the kids. I know it's already stressful enough as it is, but just some things to think about, right? Maybe tomorrow you can have a conversation. Ask the kid too, what do they think about it? What did they learn? Right? What are they going to action now? What do they think they should be doing now? Don't tell your kid what to do. Have your kid think it through, right? Have them think, okay, she said this, or I learned this, and this is my goal, so this is how I'm going to get there. Have them develop their plan and see how you can support them, or see how that's a good idea. Or maybe we need to massage this idea a little bit more and we do this instead, right? But have them think that way. I know as parents, sometimes it's just right away, you got to tell the kids what to do. I know the kids sometimes don't want to hear it, but have them think it through, right? So anyway, all that's to say, if you do have any questions later on, my contact information's up there. I'm Catherine. Sandy, again, is our other counselor. You're more than welcome to reach out to her too. You can also, if you do want to schedule, we do one-on-ones, like one-on-one meetings. If you want to schedule one, you can also go to our website, copticedu.org, and there you can schedule time to meet with either myself or Sandy, or either or. You can recommend whichever one you want. So I know questions might come up after. And then lastly too, I don't know if anyone's on social media, but we're also on Instagram and Facebook if you want to follow those pages. We do post regularly on different things there too. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your patience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We're so happy and grateful for Coptic Education Foundation, for Sharif, ربنا يناح نفسه, the one who has a brilliant vision to establish and to start this service. Of course, for Monique, his daughter, she's running the foundation. Grateful for Catherine, coming from New York, by the way, and her dad, Catherine Hanna. And we're grateful for Sandy, and our representative in the Coptic Education Foundation is Dr. Amal and Dalia سمعان. فبرضو هم اللينك بيننا وبين ال Coptic Education Foundation. Thank you so much, Catherine, again. We're very grateful. Hopefully يعني we'll see our kids كده best of the best. تفضلوا نصلي. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Our dear Heavenly Father, are very grateful for our meeting today, for the new information, the wonderful presentation we received today. We ask you to bless and to reward all the servants who are working in the Coptic Education Foundation, to bless Catherine and her family, and her career as well. Bless our kids, our youth to grow and to be deep-rooted in you and to be always successful and effective in the society with the intercession of Saint Mary, Saint Mina, Bob Kyrillos, all the saints. Make us sure to pray, thankful our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. As we forgive those who trespass against us, lead us not into temptation, but go in peace. The peace of our Lord be with you all. Scout, run to the scout. Coordinator, run to the coordinator.